Gentleman from Texas.
I yield myself 30 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized.
It's been said that there's been no inspections in Iraq, and yet the International Atomic Energy Agency was in Iraq this very year, and this was the report. I am pleased to confirm that between 20 and 23 January 2001, a four-person IAEA team carried out a physical inventory verification of the declared nuclear material remaining in Iraq under IAEA seal. For its part, Iraq provided the necessary cooperation for the inspection team to perform its activities effectively and efficiently. I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Washington, Dr. McDermott.
The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 5 minutes. Without objection, so ordered. How many votes do we roll?
Mr. Speaker, neither Mr. Paul nor I think Saddam Hussein is a nice man or good for the world. But we rise in opposition to this resolution because of the way it's being done, the time in which it's being done, and what is implied by this resolution but not clearly stated. No one disputes Iraq's behavior. We encourage the Kurds to arise against them, and then we abandon them. We encourage the Shia down in Basra to rise against them, and we abandon them. But we have not, in this place, forgotten what Saddam Hussein is about. But the question is, why is there sudden rush to do this 48 hours before the Congress adjourns for a month, giving the president unlimited apparent ability to act? Now, after September 11th, with the exception of one person on this floor, we authorized the president to do what needed to be done with respect to the acts of 9/11. And things have gone reasonably well. They are not through yet. We don't know where Osama bin Laden is. We don't know whether we are precipitating further problems by al-Qaeda going into Pakistan. We now have India on the borders armed. We have all kinds of questions being raised about that area that have been precipitated by our actions. And I think certainly we knew that some of that would happen, but we were willing to take that risk. Now we come out here to pass a resolution. This resolution says the President of the United States should insist on monitoring weapons development in Iraq. Nobody out here disagrees with that. Iraq should allow UN weapons inspectors into Iraq as required by Security Council Resolution 687. No one disagrees with that. Iraq remains in material and unacceptable breach of international obligations. No one disagrees with that. And now we come to it. The refusal of Iraq to admit UN weapons inspectors into any facility covered by provisions of Security Council Resolution 687 should be considered an act of aggression against the United States and its allies. This is the resolution that's laying on the table out here as the one that is being passed on this floor. And I know someone's going to stand up and say we've changed it. When you're doing it at 100 miles an hour, it's no wonder that members who care can't figure out what's going on. So I would say to everybody here who's going to come down here and vote on this, just ask yourself, are you back in 1964 in the House of Representatives when they brought the Gulf of Tonkin out here? They brought the Gulf of Tonkin into the Senate, and they were about to vote on it, and only two members of that body voted against it, Ernest Gruning of Alaska and Mr. Morris from Oregon. A third member raised a question. His name was Gaylord Nelson from Wisconsin, and he said, I want to put in an amendment here that says that this does not authorize the putting of troops on the ground in Vietnam. Now, Bill Fulbright went down to the White House and said to Lyndon Johnson, Lyndon, old Gaylord's going to put an amendment on here that we can't put troops on the ground. And Lyndon Johnson said, well, you just go up there and tell old Gaylord I have no intention of putting any troops on the ground. 500 and some odd thousand later, 55,000 deaths, and Lyndon Johnson didn't have any intention to put anybody on the ground. You can understand why Gaylord voted no. And I don't know what Mr. Graham and his colleagues mean by this. A refusal by Iraq to admit the United States weapons inspectors be considered an act of aggression against the United States. Is that a declaration of war? Well, if it is a declaration of war, then maybe the Geneva Convention should now be called in. The President of the United States, I'll yield in just a moment. The President of the United States, when we gave him this carte blanche in Afghanistan to do whatever he thought necessary, now we have military tribunals, secret tribunals. We have people all over this country being held without charge, in secrecy, with no access to attorneys, because the president deems that's what we're going to do. Now, I don't want to go home having given the president carte blanche to do whatever he wants for the month of December and January in Iraq. And
the gentleman has expired. Time of the gentleman. Gentleman is recognized for additional 2 minutes.
Well, I was just going to suggest that my dear friend from Washington is inveighing against a resolution that doesn't exist. We've taken the word aggression out. We took it out a long time ago. I don't know how it crept into your copy, but I hope your other notes are more accurate.
Well, the gentleman from Illinois should know that this was picked up in the Speaker's lobby on the table, where it is your responsibility to put the bills that are being considered on the floor. And if this is not what it is, then you're going too fast. And that's the whole point of what Mr. Paul and I are saying. We may not disagree. We may agree ultimately we need to go to Iraq, but not at 100 miles an hour without anybody understanding, because this is what you put out there for me to read. And I learned to read in about the first grade, and I'm reading what was here. And if that's not what was supposed to be out there, I certainly would like to see people explain why this was put in on the 12th of December, passed out of committee on the 12th of December, and is here. And you can't get the right version printed to be in the House. You don't care about the process. And the United States Congress is losing its power by this kind of action. When you walk away and allow people to put stuff out here without anybody reading it, they don't know. We may soon have a package of stimulus out here that repeals some parts of the campaign finance law. We're all watching carefully to see if we can catch it. But when you do it at 100 miles an hour, I have to vote against it.
The gentleman from Illinois.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrabacher.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I rise in support, strong support of this resolution. 10 years ago, the United States of America and our allies blew it. We had the opportunity to eliminate a major threat to the world peace and world stability and a major dictator and tyrant to the people of Iraq, and we did not do the job. We did not finish the job. Now is the time for us to finish that job. By not finishing the job before, we permitted, for example, the Kuwaitis to suffer with hundreds of their people still being held prisoners of war, MIAs, prisoners of war. The equivalent of 50,000 Americans would be held today without us knowing of what Saddam Hussein has done to the Kuwaitis and still does to them. Saddam Hussein still has a vicious dictatorship, and Saddam Hussein is at war with the United States, most importantly. And I'm very happy that my friend from Texas doesn't want us to be at war with Iraq. But the fact is, Saddam Hussein is at war with us no matter what we would like to be at. And if we permit Saddam Hussein to have nuclear and chemical biological weapons, weapons of mass destruction, he will kill millions of Americans. Make no mistake about it. He has a blood feud with us. And we are not talking about a war with Iraq. We are talking about a war with Saddam Hussein. And we should liberate Iraq in the same way that we have liberated Afghanistan now that we have the chance and the opportunity to do so. And how did we liberate Afghanistan? We simply supported the people of Afghanistan. I do not have the time. If you yield your time for me, I'll be happy to get in a dialogue with you on that, Ron Paul. But what did we do in Afghanistan? We helped the people liberate themselves from the Taliban tyranny. The people in Iraq hate Saddam Hussein much more than the people of Afghanistan hated the Taliban. By helping them liberate themselves, we are protecting our own population from a Holocaust. We are protecting the world for peace, and we are doing what's right. If you would
Time of the gentleman has expired.
I'll yield the gentleman an additional minute.
Gentleman is recognized for one additional minute.
And if the gentleman would yield.
Certainly.
If you were to find out that China was much more involved in the Taliban and the terrorist attacks on 9/11 than anything Saddam Hussein has done, would you be willing to do to China what you're willing to do to Iraq?
Let me put it this way. The answer is yes, because, but I would not right away. Like the President says, we must do things sequentially, and we must be absolutely committed to the job. But you do things sequentially. The next order of business is taking care of the threat in Iraq. And if China is, yes, helping terrorists murder thousands of Americans, yeah, we should help the Chinese people overthrow their dictatorship as well.
And if the gentleman would yield additional.
Yes.
And you would do the same thing to Pakistan and Syria and Saudi Arabia and Egypt.
I agree with the President of the United States that this is a sequential battle against terrorism. If those countries are engaged in supporting terrorists who kill thousands of Americans or continue a belligerency that threatens millions of our lives, yes, one at a time, we've got to take care of them. If we do not, millions of our people will pay the price. Who could have ever guessed that by not taking care of Afghanistan, thousands of our people would be dead?